الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا والصلاة والسلام على خير الأنام وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. من وين التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير والحق والتمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسول الله ابتغاء مرضات الله وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. Praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, praise it's worthy of a beneficent bestower of bounties, the benevolent granter of favours. We ask our Lord Most High and Merciful to send copious and unlimited and eternal blessings and salutations upon our beloved Prophet, Sayyidina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We recognise this land in which we sit is Aboriginal land, and we pay our respects to the elders past and present. Amma ba'd. So alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, one day of the blessed month of Ramadan has passed, and the believer, the seeker, the one who truly wants to get to Allah Azza wa Jal and truly wants to change their state and truly wants to embody their humanity in the most perfect form, in the manner shown to us by the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, would already notice a change in their lives. The person whose intention is the Prophet of Allah alayhi salatu wa sallam, he said, Man sama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaban ghufira lahu ma taqaddama, and there's another riwayah, wa ma ta'akhkhara min dhanbi. So the one who fasts Ramadan imanan, belief in 100% belief, conviction in Allah Azza wa Jal, wa ihtisaban, seeking the reward, seeking the benefit, seeking the change, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives that person's sins. And there's one version of the prophetic tradition that says the past sins, and one even says the future sins. So that's based on the fasting of the month. That's the essence of it. And the catalyst for it in that hadith is imanan wa ihtisaban. So it's about the spiritual state, one's internal state, one's state of faith, and one state of seeking from Allah, knowledge of Allah, nearness to Allah, proximity to Allah Azza wa Jal. So if a person has those two things, even with one day of fasting, even with not even 12 hours, 12 hours here in Sydney, or 11 and a half. 11, is that it? Yeah. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. 11 and a half hours here in Sydney, other places in different parts of the world, in Northern Hemisphere in particular where there's summer, they're doing 15, 18, 20 hours some places, 21 hours in some places. So even in that 11 and a half hours that one would have fasted, and the evening before and last night, the person who is sincere, a sadiq, in their endeavours to embody their humanity and follow the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, and understand their cause and their purpose of being in this life, and how they're going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what happens when a person returns to Allah at death and after death, then that individual will have noticed a change in their life. And not just a little minimal change, but a profound change. Because this is the month of mercy in the first 10 days, rahmah. It's compassion, it's empathy from Allah and sympathy from Allah Azza wa Jal, that Allah Azza wa Jal, He's allowed us to, alhamdulillah, tawfiq, given us that capacity to live until this first day and into this second day, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. And other than just one's intention and one's personal focus in terms of what they want from the month of Ramadan. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِ بِي, I'm according to how my servant, my slave as the word is, looks upon me. So if we're not seeking the ula, no, we're not seeking the high stations, we're not seeking that proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we're not seeking the complete change in our mental attitude, in our physiological, psychological attitude to the world around us, and ourselves, and our faith, and our deen, and the practices, in other words, the outward aspects, the ibadat, and we're not changing our tawajjuh, our focus on the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, and we're not changing our focus on the world around us, then what are we asking from Allah? We're asking for the 30 days to finish, quickly go, so that we can get back to our old lives, so we can get back to our old habits, so we can get back to the way it was, the way we're familiar with. And unfortunately, misfortunately, human beings have a tendency to grab on to what they're familiar with, no matter how bad it is for an individual. No matter how detrimental to one's mental health, spiritual health, or physical health a situation may be, we have that tendency When you start talking to somebody about change in any way, shape or form, they're generally reticent. They don't want to, well, me, I don't need to change, I'm fine. So if we're going to have that attitude with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most blessed time of the year, then what are we going to get? As the Prophet said, some people only get ju' wal atash. They only get hunger and thirst from their fasting. So if we haven't noticed a change in a day, there's alarm bells should already be sounding. Alarm bells should already be sounding. If I haven't changed my normal life, if I haven't changed my social life, if I haven't changed my online life, if I haven't changed my ibadat, my worship, in other words, my dini life, if I haven't changed my focus in terms of on who I am as an individual and internally what I am as a spiritual being, if I haven't noticed a change in that, then what have I done in this first day and a half? It's almost over, it's even less than that. Day and almost 3/5 or whatever it is. What is it that I've achieved? If my connection to the Book of Allah hasn't increased, if my dua, my supplication and seeking from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that which Allah has, which is everything in terms of this life and the next, and also for my brothers and sisters, seek for them and ask for them, and then the thoughts that I've had since the Ramadan started are my own, they're mine. They're not involved with shaitan. So if my psychological state hasn't changed, then what am I waiting for? What, another 29 days or 28 or whatever it may be, 27 if we're saying today is the second day. What is it? There should have been a profound change in my being in one day of Ramadan and a half or 2, 3/5 or whatever we said. In that little bit of time. Because that's all it takes. That's all it takes. And another reason, which is more poignant and more relevant than that, is that the ulama talk about that the first day of Ramadan is the day of nadra, it's called. The day when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's countenance and gaze goes to His subhanahu wa ta'ala's faithful slaves and servants. So that means if we haven't felt something in the first day, we haven't been part of those people that Allah's gazed upon. One day and change. So that's the main reason. If we haven't looked at these things, then we're not deserving of the gaze of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is Allah going to look at us? There's plenty of 1.8 billion now, they're saying, not 1.6 anymore. 1.8 billion Muslims out there. If we don't subject ourselves to the greatness of Allah Azza wa Jal, and we don't subject ourselves to the rahamat or the rahmah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us is on offer in this month, then how do we expect to change? Yeah, that we make the niyyah every single day in Ramadan. Every single day, especially the Shafi'is, every single day in Ramadan. Every evening after we break our fast, we make the intention for the next day. Or before the fajr of the day, we make our intention. That intention has to encompass all those things we've just mentioned. It has to, if we want to get the proper benefit from the month of Ramadan. So inshallah Azza wa Jal, if we haven't already felt it, we need to put ourselves inshallah Azza wa Jal in a path to Allah and in a position with Allah so that in bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala we can benefit from Allah Azza wa Jal and benefit from this blessed time that Allah has khassasa subhanahu wa ta'ala. Excuse me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has particularized this time as a time of nafahat, of rahamat, of wiradat, of gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of divine gifts from Allah Azza wa Jal that will make us the people that Allah wants us to be, inshaAllah. So we continue inshaAllah with Imam Haddad's Book of Assistance. Which page are we on?
101.
101. So we say, قال المؤلف رحمه الله رضي الله عنه وعنكم نفعنا به وبكم فصل وعليك بإقراء السلام على كل من تعرف ومن لا تعرف من المسلمين على كل من تعرفه ومن لا تعرفه من المسلمين وإذا سلمت على أحد منهم فلم يرد عليك لا تسيء به الظن وقل لعله لم يسمع أو لعله رد فلم أسمعه. So the top of page 26 page 101, chapter 26 on salutations and a salutary opinion. He says, the Imam al-Haddad, rahimahullah, may Allah Azza wa Jal have mercy on him, may Allah be pleased and have mercy on you, may Allah be pleased with you and pleased with him, inshaAllah Azza wa Jal. He says, greet with the salam, assalamu alaikum, all Muslims, whether you know them or not. If you greet someone and he or she does not return your greeting, do not think ill of that individual, of him or her, but rather say to yourself, she may not have heard, or perhaps she answered and I did not hear. Alright? So, the salam, in essence, we say, assalamu alaikum, and really the better the salutation, the better it is for us. So really when we give our salams, the salihin, they always say, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, the full salam. We're a bit stingy with our salams in the city because in city life, it's a busy life, we're always running late or we don't leave our house unless we're doing something. It's not usually leisurely things, it's usually we're committed to whatever it might be, we've got to be there. So, salam, that's our salams when you see people on the street. Salam. Just salam, one word, you know. Or it's good if you're writing a message or an email or something. Salam's alright. Understand what it means. But even then, I would suggest that you go to your keyboard function and you can put a couple of letters, and when you type those letters, it turns into a whole word. What's that? Whatever, you can work it out, whatever it is. And then put the two, like some people say ASA, Assalamu alaikum. Just make that so that when you type those three letters in, it actually prints out the whole word. On my phone, I don't know how to really do it. You go to keyboard settings and you do it in your keyboard settings. You can do it on your computer as well. So that way, you're getting the full reward, the maximum reward for giving the salam. And when we say as-salam, what's the word as-salam referred to? Right? First of all, Allah. It's one of the 99 names of Allah. Asma Allah al-Husna. So basically, you're saying to the person, Allah with you. As-salam alayka. And Dar as-Salam is where? Jannah. Right? Dar, the house of Salam, is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so to speak. It's not really the house of Allah. But it's the house of the manifestation of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ridha Allah, which is Jannah. So you're saying that to the person. Hopefully your deeds will get better as well. Whether you know them or not. Now this is the Prophet of Allah said that at the end of times, one of the signs of the end of times is people will only give salams to the people they know. And I can verify, in my experience, that that's the case. If you come out from Jummah, if you come out from a big gathering after Taraweeh, people only give salam to the people they know. They say, they walk right by you, or you do the same thing to them. Assalamu alaikum, brother, how are you? There's 100 people around. The only fact that they go through 20 people to get to one person to give salam, that's not the prophetic way. Okay, so then the other part is that if you greet someone and he or she does not return your greeting, do not think ill of that person. They might have their mind never heard you, as he says. He says, but rather say to yourself, they may not have heard, or perhaps they answered and I did not hear that person. So that's the way to keep our husn al-dhan, our giving people the benefit of the doubt when we deal with them. Because people, they might be busy, they might have had their headphones in or whatever, they didn't hear, they didn't think you're a Muslim or whatever the case might be. It says, وَإِذَا دَخَلْتَ بَيْتَكَ فَسَلِّمْ عَلَى أَهْلِكَ وَإِذَا دَخَلْتَ مَسْجِدًا أَوْ بَيْتًا وَلَيْسَ فِيهِ أَحَدٍ فَقُلْ السَّلَامُ عَلَيْنَا وَعَلَى عِبَادِ اللَّهِ الصَّالِحِينَ وَإِذَا لَقِيتَ مُسْلِمًا فَاجْتَهِدْ أَن تَبْدَأَهُ بِالسَّلَامِ قبل أن يسلم عليك قيل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم إذا لقي المسلم المسلم فأيها يبدأ بالسلام قال أولهما بالله وفي الحديث يسلم الراكب على الماشي والقائم على القاعد والصغير على الكبير والقليل على الكثير. So in this in this paragraph, he gives us some insight into the etiquettes of actually giving the salams. So it says, when you enter a house or your house, greet your family with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And when you enter a mosque or an empty house, say Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadullahi salihin. Peace be upon us and upon the virtuous servants of God. When you meet a Muslim, always try to greet him before he greets you. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was once asked, when a Muslim meets a Muslim, who should give greetings first? And he replied, alayhi salatu wasalam, the one most devoted to God. And in another hadith, that a rider should greet a pedestrian, a man standing should greet a man seated, a younger man should greet a man who was older, and a smaller a larger group, a larger group. So that's some of the sunan in terms of giving salams. That when you enter your own house, you should say that. You should say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And then whoever's in the house, if you're in the house and whoever enters your home, family member or guest or whoever it might be, says that, wherever you are in the home, except if you're in the bathroom, then you should return that salam so that the person can hear it. And the other thing is, if you enter the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أو بيتا ليس فيه أحد. So this is what goes on today in the house of Allah. Right? People walk into the house of Allah, people are praying, someone's reading Qur'an, someone's making dua. Assalamu alaikum at the top of their voice. The issue is that when someone gives salam, the ruling of that is sunnah. So to give salam to another Muslim, it's a sunnah. But it's a farad, it's a wajib to respond to that salam. So what if everyone's in prayer, or everyone's reciting the Qur'an, or people are in dua? They've got to break their dua, break their recitation of the Qur'an, or even break their prayer to give salam to that person. So that's not from the adab of entering the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not from the etiquettes of entering the house of Allah. And then the other thing is, people lose their concentration doing whatever they're doing. So the sunnah is, to enter the house of Allah and give salams is the same as the sunnah to enter a house that doesn't have anyone in it, that you know there's nobody in it. And it says here in transliterated, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadullahi salihin. So you say Assalamu alayna, us and those people, and those righteous servants of Allah subhanahu wa, the virtuous servants, the angels, whoever, there might be jinns, pious jinns, whoever it might be, whoever serves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you can't see, they may be there in the room. So that's the salam that one gives when entering, even a class of knowledge. People walk in, there's a class, go, Assalamu alaikum. Where's you for someone to respond now? So breaks sometimes, all right, it might be appropriate, but the majority of times, that's not the proper way. It's a prophetic way to enter the house of Allah, or to enter a gathering of dhikr, or remembrance of Allah, or a gathering of the ilm, of knowledge. That's not the prophetic way to do it. The prophetic way is to say it, and who do you say it to? Yourself. No need to say it out loud. Just enough that you can hear it. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadullahi salihin. So that's something that, one of the sunnah that is forgotten in today's day and age. And you can see it a lot now because of Tarawih Salat. We spend a little bit more time in the masjid, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Alhamdulillah, in my local mosque yesterday, there was no room for anyone to pray Tarawih. It was full, alhamdulillah. And even in Fajr this morning, full, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. There was 2 Salat Fajr, mashallah, because there were so many people. Inshallah, Allah give us the tawfiq to continue that outside the month of Ramadan. So when you meet a Muslim, always try and greet him before he greets you. The reason behind that is, the person giving salam, and this is one of the anomalies, so to speak, in terms of the Islamic jurisprudence of the Sharia. Because generally you would think that an action that's a fard has more reward than an action that's a sunnah. And generally that's the case, except when it comes to salam. Afshu salama bainakum. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Qur'an, increase or spread peace, salam, and that means that salam and also peace, justice and equity between yourselves. So to give the salam is more rewarding than to respond in this situation. So that's why we should be striving in Allah Azza wa Jal to beat anyone else to give salams. And the Prophet of Allah was asked, when a Muslim meets a Muslim, who should give greetings first? And he replied, the one most devoted to God. And of course that's the case. Awaluhuma, the one who God is a priority for that person, because that person who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a priority is seeking out any way, shape or form to gain proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and gain emulation of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, and therefore rida of Allah, the pleasure of Allah. So of course they're the one who's going to beat everyone else in giving salam. Of course that's going to be the case. Then the Prophet ﷺ talks about some etiquette. He was asked ﷺ, when a Muslim meets a Muslim, who should give greetings first? And then and the other one is that the rider should give greetings to the pedestrian. And the pedestrian, there's another riwayah, the pedestrian to those who are seated. So if you're walking past some Muslims who are seated, it's up to you to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay? The man standing should greet a seated person. So in other words, if someone comes into the room, whatever, and they're standing, they should give salam to those who are seated. And then the younger to the older. And it's not how it's defined in Arabic. In Arabic he says, وَالصَّغِيرُ عَلَى الْكَبِيرِ. So we've discussed this previously, that Saghir, the lesser person, so to speak, is not only lesser in age, but it's lesser in status. So if someone that you respected, your father, your mother, whoever it might be, an uncle, a grandfather, then even someone's uncle who's younger, that might be the case. Some people have their uncles or their aunties that are younger than them, or a teacher who might be younger, or a scholar who may or may not be younger. Then the preference is to give to the person of status in Islam. And we spoke about that before, the righteous people, the sada, the person who is a descendant of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, the person who spends a lot of money fi sabilillah, the qari, the muqri, the person who's a reciter of the Qur'an. So these people, irrespective of age. So this has two connotations, the Prophet of Allah is saying. Firstly, age, certainly age. And then secondly, status. And status not only in affairs of the world, but in affairs of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a smaller group to a larger group. So if someone's in a small group, that we give salam to those who are in a larger group. So there's also something that we have to watch out between men and women giving salams to each other. In the Shafi'iyah, it's haram for a woman to give salam to a man unless there's some sort of a maslahah, like she's dealing with that person to assalamu alaikum. But just walking in the street or seeing that person, not having any direct business with that person, it's haram in the Shafi'iyah. And it's makruh, it's detested or not disliked for a man to say it to a woman unnecessarily. So in other words, he's dealing with it, he's going to buy something from the shop or vice versa. He says, Assalamu alaikum as a greeting to open, wa alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, then that's okay. But just for no reason, it's not something that should happen between Muslims. So that you keep your mind to that. He says, وَعَلَيْكَ بِالتَّشْمِيتِ الْعَاطِسِ إِذَا حَمَدَ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَحْمُدْ أو يَحْمَدْ فذكره بقولك الحمد لله ولا تدخل على بيت غيرك حتى تستأذن أولا فإن استأذنت ثلاثا فلم يؤذن لك فلا تعد الاستئذان وإذا ناداك مسلما فأجبه بلبيك. So then he goes on to say, when someone sneezes and then praises and says Alhamdulillah, then say to that person, Yarhamakullah, may Allah have mercy on you. If he or she does not praise Allah by saying Alhamdulillah, then remind that person by saying Alhamdulillah out loud so they can say it. And this is one of the huquq, haqqul muslim ala al-muslim, tashmit. They say tashmit is the Arabic word for it, to say to that person, Yarhamakullah. And what if it's a non-Muslim? If the non-Muslim sneezes, what do we say? Allah wa yaslah balukum. May Allah guide you and rectify your state. So someone sneezes, that people apologize today when they sneeze. Sorry, it's not something. It's not a it's not a burp or something. It's a sneeze. It's involuntary in that sense. So it's okay to say to that person in English, if you can say to them, bless you, then in close to yourself, say, may Allah guide you and rectify your state. Because non-Muslims are not going to understand Arabic as well. So you might even, if you know the person, say it to them in English, may Allah guide you, or may God guide you and rectify your state. If you know they're going to get offended by it, the person you know, it's good to say it and explain it to them what it means. And we know the story of the Jewish man who, this is how it started. The Prophet ﷺ, when someone sneezed, said, Yarhamakullah. So a Jewish man came to the gathering of the Prophet ﷺ and he put something in his nose so he could sneeze, and he sneezed, thinking the Prophet would say, Yarhamakullah. And the Prophet said, Hadakallah, may Allah guide you and rectify your state. So do not enter a house other than your own without taking permission. Right? Without taking permission, without asking permission. If you ask thrice and receive no answer, then ask no more and depart. So look, I would also say even in your own home, particularly if you know that there's, for example, if you're a man, you know there's women in the home, it's sunnah to knock as well, and then give the salams outside, and also give salams inside, because there might be women inside that maybe not wearing hijab or whatever the case might be, especially if you're not expected. I mean, today we've got phones and we SMS each other and whatever else, we message each other and phone each other, say we're coming at a particular time. But it's also from good adab, from good etiquette, to make sure that you announce yourself when you're entering even your own home, especially like I said, if we know that there's a gathering there or there are guests around, so that people can make arrangements for themselves. So, in other words, asking permission is at the door before we go in, and Allah Azza wa Jalla also says, don't enter the houses from the back door in the Qur'an, so we should enter from the front door, unless that's the norm in that person's house, that they don't use their front door. So we should always knock, even if we want to use the back door, we should knock on the front door, that's the proper etiquette, and seek their permission, and then if they tell us to enter from the rear door or the side door or whatever it might be, then we can do that after we've got permission of the homeowner. And when you're at someone's house and you're knocking on their door, then you should knock 3 times, and then after the 3rd time, and say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, or at least Assalamu alaikum. Then after the 3rd time, that means either no one's there, no one's home, or they can't answer for whatever reason it is, then one should leave after that. It says, وَإِذَا دَعَاكَ. Oops, we missed the part. It says, when a Muslim calls you, then answer with labbaik, which means I'm at your service. That's what the Prophet used to do, alayhi salatu wasalam. If someone called him, he'd say labbaik. He'd say, like we say to Allah when we go to the house of Allah for Hajj, labbaik Allahumma, and Umrah as well, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Ya Allah, I'm here for you, I'm at your service. What is it that you require? And that's the same way. We should get into that practice. Even if we don't use it, someone calls you, they need you for a particular thing, so say to that individual, I'm at your service. وَإِذَا دَعَاكَ إِلَى طَعَامِهِ فَلَا تَتْرُكْ الْإِجَابَةِ إِلَّا لِعُذْرٍ شَرْعِي. وَإِذَا, so there's a few little ones, we'll just take them one at a time. It says, when a Muslim, if you're invited or he or she invites you to his or her table, except unless you have a legitimate excuse, because this brings the hearts of the Muslims together. So unless you've got a prior engagement, there's an illness, there's something else that you have to attend to that is acceptable under the Sharia, you shouldn't just because you don't want to go see that person. Unless you know that there's going to be, for example, things that are not Islamically permissible there, or your deen's going to be compromised, or whatever the case might be, then those Islamic reasons for not attending, they're acceptable. Otherwise, if you just don't want to go, don't like that person or whatever, Islamically that's not really acceptable, and that's not what we should be doing. Or you'd have doubt about the food, if it's halal like we spoke about previously, or the earnings, and we spoke about that before as well. وَإِذَا أَقْسَمَ عَلَيْكَ أَن تَفْعَلْ شَيْئًا أَوْ تَتْرُكْهُ فَبِرْ قَسْمَهُ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهِ مَعْصِيَةٍ لِلَّهِ. So he says, so if he adjures you to do something, allow him to fulfill his oath so long as it does not involve anything sinful. So an adjure is a command under oath. So someone says to you, Billahi alayk, by Allah, I want you to do this. By Allah, I want you to do that. Wallahi, I want you to do that. Right? So we shouldn't have Muslims breaking their oaths. And if it's something that we can do within our power, then we should do it. As long as there's no disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that thing. وَلَا تَسْأَلْ أَحَدًا بِاللَّهِ شَيْئًا وَإِن سُئِلْتَ بِاللَّهِ شَيْئًا فَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَمْنَعْ. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ملعون من سئل بالله فلم يعطي. He says, do not beseech anyone by God, but if beseeched, in this way comply. And he didn't mention the hadith there, so we'll stick to what's in the Arabic. He says, don't ask anyone by Allah. People might ask, Billahi alayk. The Arabs have to say, by Allah, are you serious? Like, yes, that's what we say. You serious? For real? Really? But if someone asks you, if someone, don't ask people by Allah Azza wa Jalla, because there's haraj. There's haraj.
It's a hardship.
Hardship, yeah. You're putting people in a difficult position. It's a difficulty in it, right? So you don't want to do that. That's not something that we want to do. But if someone does it to you and they say, Billahi alayk, by Allah, wallahi, you're going to come and do this. Wallahi, I'm going to pay for the coffee or whatever. Let them pay. That's it. Leave it. He says, فَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَمْنَعُ. Be very wary of. Okay, do not. It's a bit not quite as strong in the English. فَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَمْنَعُ. So be very wary. Be very extremely cautious. Be extremely cautious to prevent that person. So don't make a fight, about paying for the coffee. Khalas, they said, by Allah, I'm going to pay. Wallah, I'm going to pay. Then let them pay. Because the Prophet of Allah ﷺ said, Mal'unun. The person who is asked by Allah, someone says by Allah, or they're adjured, as the English word is, which is a great word to learn. But that someone says, I adjure you to, whatever. If a person has the capacity and it's not haram and they don't do it, then that person is cursed by Allah Azza wa Jalla. That's a big deal. We don't want to end up in that state. Alright, so any questions? Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. The hadith is Mal'unun man su'ila billahi falam ya'ti. Or yu'ti. Thank you. Or any questions about any of those things?
In regards to someone invites you to his table, during Ramadan, is that a legitimate reason? I don't want to spend that much time out of the home. I want to start at home. Is that a legitimate reason?
I mean, look, it can be considered that if that's the norm. So if you do that with everybody, and if you're consistent with that, consistently saying, no, I'm not going here, I'm not going here, I'm not going here, then that could be considered acceptable. But if it's just with certain people, then that's problematic. Unless it's the certain people that understand the way you spend Ramadan, and they give you that freedom. The proper way really in Ramadan is to have iftar, is to go, have iftar, and it's not 2-hour episode, and then you get ready, go to the mosque, or you get ready, you read some Qur'an, or you do something about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together. That's what the invitation is, not just about eating. You make a dua together, you recite some Qur'an together, you make salawat together, you do something that reminds you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together, and then everyone goes their own way. So it's actually just about breaking the fast and getting the reward. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that whoever gives a fasting, breaks the fast of a fasting Muslim, even with a date or a glass of water, they'll get the reward of that person that fasted without that person's reward decreasing in any way. So you've got to be particular about that. But I think so. I mean, Ramadan, we make it into a social time, and in reality it isn't. And in reality it isn't. I mean, I understand why that happens, because in the West, in this, whatever we call it, the modern world, I suppose, the first world countries, or whatever you want to call it. I don't like calling it the West, but because we're certainly on the West, we're South Pacific here, so we're very far away from it. So, but in these modern first world countries, the reason why it becomes social is because it's very rare that we get together with our family for a meal. It's not a common thing, so we try and make it that way. But really, it's about Allah, and it's about connecting to Allah Azza wa Jalla in this month, and changing our state. So there's a wajhat nadar, there's validity to what you say, but there's got to be consistency in it. Any questions about this or Ramadan or anything else?
Eating at people's house, if you're not sure if food's halal, are you giving the benefit of the doubt, or?
That's a good question about eating some food. I mean, you've got to make sure. That's one of the things about Ramadan, is that make sure that when you make your iftar, when you break your fast, that you know 100% that the food's halal, whatever it is you're eating. So it depends on the relationship you have with the individual that's inviting you. It depends whether it's just your own doubts, or you've made investigations as to where they get the supply of their meat from. But you've got to use your best judgment in that regard. And if you have doubt, you've got to stay away. It's as simple as that.
So that just ask them randomly if it's halal or not?
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, you'd ask where they get their meat from rather than if it's halal or not. Where do you get your supply from, etc. And then you'd have to make your investigations as to whether that supply source is...
If they get offended.
It's better for someone to get offended than you lose your Ramadan. Because don't forget, a person who eats haram, how many days their deeds aren't accepted for? 40 days, a person has to pray and fast, but it's not accepted. There's no reward for it. So you can choose which one. It's not nice to offend a Muslim, and Allah hates that. At the same time, like we understand in this country, in Australia, and I imagine a lot of modern first world countries, that that'd be the case. And even some Muslim countries, like even when you go to Medina and you go to Mecca, alhamdulillah now, because people ask so much, or we're just there, alhamdulillah, we did Umrah at the beginning of the year, you know, this comes from Brazil, and this comes from Canada, and this comes from, you know, different places. So unless you're sure about it, you know, you've got to be careful. So you've got to, you know, have some sort of connection with the person to ask them, you know, in that way. No.
Fajr, last year you told us that there's like the Canada day is like, the Canada time is 15 minutes, sorry, 15 minutes behind the actual sunrise.
Yeah. So I mean, that's something that because the Fajr itself is a Fajr al-Sadiq. It's when the white line, we read it in Surah Al-Baqarah, or heard it, Khayt al-Abyad, when the white line comes across the horizon. So previously they were saying it's an hour and a half before sunrise, before the actual dawn, the sunrise, before the sun breaks over through the horizon. So there's been some investigations into it, and they're saying it's less than that. So really, I would say stick to whatever's in the calendar in terms of stopping to eat, but don't pray your Fajr until another 15 or 20 minutes after the calendar time. That's my advice.
Yeah, because I remember last year there was a mosque, they'd pray exactly on the calendar time. Alhamdulillah, this year they're actually waiting 15 minutes or 20 minutes until...
If that's the case, then stay away from that place, because it's the Mufti's office and the you know, the Imam's council that have come up with that. It's not just somebody. Yeah. So if some, you know, like, we have to be careful. When the Mufti says something, he's the one that makes decisions for Muslims in this country. And even with the moon sighting and that. So even if someone sees the moon, Islamically speaking, even if somebody sees the moon, who actually makes the declaration of the start of Ramadan? It's the Amir. It's the Amir, whether it's the Khalifa, whether it's the Wali, the governor, whether it's the highest authority, and that's what happens. So it doesn't matter if it's seen, and if a person sees it themselves, right, then then the Amir or the Mufti or whoever it is, in our case the Mufti, so we'll just use that example, and the Mufti says no, fasting is the next day, then that person, they themselves is fard upon just the individual who saw the moon to fast, but not anyone else who hears from this is thabit, this is Islamic jurisprudence, this is the Sharia. So that's why, you know, it's not about the moon being sighted or not being sighted in that sense, because it's sighted throughout the world on Saturday. It was sighted in many, many places throughout the world. So it's not about that. It's about who actually makes the declaration of of Ramadan by accepting someone's sighting. That's the issue. And that falls upon the shoulders of the Islamic authority in that state, in that area. And that's the Mufti in Australia. And the Mufti is the one who's come up with that ruling about Fajr. So we can't just flog it off and say, oh no, my calendar says that. We have to consider that in our ibadat. And yeah, of course, we know everyone's doing one thing, but the reason why things are changing for us in Australia, in particular, because we're a bit slow. You know, we're behind the times in terms of an application of Sharia to the way we live in Australia. And as that becomes more sophisticated, and we have a greater understanding of our Sharia and the application of Sharia in Australia, of course things are going to change to how they were before. But as we said previously, and we say all the time, we're Muslims and not Muslims, every human beings are reticent to change. We don't want to change. Why? I'm fine. I've been doing it that way for 20 years. So what have you been doing that way for 20 years? It's wrong. It wasn't wrong 20 years ago, but now someone has done the research and they've come up and they said, well, applying the research to the Sharia, this is the ruling. Well, I can't just stick to what I've been doing. I can't be outside. You know, we spoke about many times about Bilal Allah marda anhu and Abu Dhar Allah marda anhu. They were with the Prophet. They didn't hear from a hadith. They were with the Prophet of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam in Arafah, and the Prophet prayed Qasr Jama' Dhuhr and Asr on the day of Arafah night. So he prayed joined together Dhuhr and Asr, 2 rak'at each of them. Join them together. Why don't you go check on your sister? Join them together, and the Amir at the time didn't do that. The Khalifa at the time didn't do that. And so Bilal, he could have stood up and said, oh, you know, I was there with the Prophet of Allah, and the Prophet did that. Abu Dhar was there on the other side of Arafah, and he said, I could have said, I was there with the Prophet of Allah, but they didn't. They followed the Imam. They followed the Amir. They followed the Wali. The Imam is probably the better word, the leader. Because it's going to cause discord and doubt in the hearts and the minds of the believers. And that's not, especially in this day and age, we're already divided on so many different things. It's the last time we want to get into that situation. So we need to take that into consideration when we pray our Fajr and we listen to what in particular the Imam has said to us in Australia. Or any other questions about that? Any clarifications, agreements, disagreements?
Where do you draw the line though, in following the Amir?
Well, you draw the line if he says to you, tells you to do something blatantly haram, or that's blatantly kufr.
What if there's a clash in madhabs?
And then you follow the Imam. If there's a clash in opinions, Islamic opinions, madhahib, or whatever it might be, then you follow the Imam. That's how it works. The Imam is responsible. What did the Prophet say? Ati'uni. Allah says, Ati'u Allah wa Rasuluhu wa ulil amri minkum. It's tied with the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tied with the following of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu is ulil amri minkum, Imam. Whether you like him or you don't like him, it doesn't have to do with it. That's a personal thing. This is not personal, this is business. The business of deen. The business of deen. And the business of deen has a protocol. And that protocol is to follow the Imam. Otherwise, everyone will be doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And then what's going to happen? Al-jam'atu rahma, al-jam'atu rahma, wal-firqatu adab. Being together, unified, is rahmah from Allah. Allah's nusra comes. Allah's divine help comes. But if we're divided, then the divine help Allah says, all right, go organize yourself. Oh, you think you can do it? Go ahead, go and do it. You think you can do it? You go ahead. You think you go ahead, go, and then what? We're in the state we're in today. So irrespective of like our personal preferences, as we said, or our own opinion on the matter, Islamically speaking, we have an obligation, an Islamic duty to do that.
And what about the zoning of the areas, like what classifies what area can have an Amir or a Mufti?
Well, in Australia, alhamdulillah, we're the only island, nation, continent. So it's easy for us. If you live in Australia, follow the Imam. Nice and simple.
So you can say states, you can split up the states.
Well, he's the Imam of the whole of Australia. If the states do something separately, then that's for them. Then you can choose if that's the case. If this federal body of Imams does something and the state body of Imams does something else, then you can choose from there. It's different in that scenario.
You can't break away and form your own.
If you wanted to break away, you could, but the issue is about recognition. And the issue about is who's qualified. It goes back to who's qualified to do that. But that's frowned upon in Islamic jurisprudence. To break away and do your own thing is frowned upon. To have an umbrella, to have a group that's subservient to that group, and it's that relates to the Imam, and it's sanctioned by the Imam, that's fine. If it's sanctioned by the Imam, that's fine. But doing things that aren't sanctioned by the Imam is problematic. It's problematic because again, it's a fitna. وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَكْبَرُ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ. The fitna is worse, more extreme than killing, and it's akbaru, it's more immense than killing. So it's a big thing to get into that. And that's not for us to delve into anyway. We should leave those affairs to those people that Allah's given the knowledge and given the ideology and the capacity and the philosophy and the experience to deal with those things.
So what if the Imam gives them permission to do a local sighting?
Yeah, that's fine. If the Imam gives them permission, it's different. So whatever the case might be, if he's sanctioned a group or a committee or whatever it might be to work on a specific project, that's okay. But in the end, that committee should go back to the Imam, and the Imam makes the final decision. That's how it works. But if we get everyone doing their own thing, it's anarchy, it's mayhem.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I have one just in regards to like the white wine vinegar or whatever the dressing, like the dressing
Sure.
and stuff. Is that acceptable because it's like burnt off?
Yeah, because it's gone from a different state. So it's gone from a state of being juice, whatever kind of juice it was,
Yeah.
then it's gone to the state of being alcohol, and then it's gone to the state of being vinegar. So it's changed from that state. It's no longer alcohol, even though it was at one time. So it can't be considered to be alcohol, irrespective of what form it had previously.
So any vinegar is okay?
Not any vinegar, because there's things in there, but in the Shafi'iyya, in the Shafi'i madhab, that if it becomes vinegar of its own accord without having chemicals put into it or having in particular objects put into it, rocks or apple cores, catalysts, the things that make it ferment quicker and whatever it's not fermentation for vinegar, it's a different, it's called something else, it's not actually fermentation. It's fermentation to the state it gets called alcohol. Is it distilled or something? I don't know what it is, but the next stage, the takhleel in Arabic it's called, not sure what it's called in English,
oxidation.
That chemical oxidation, whatever it is, that process, as long as it happens naturally, Islamically speaking, you can eat, drink whatever vinegar you want. Otherwise, if it happens by things being put into it, additives, then in the Shafi'iyya, it's not acceptable. In the other madhahib, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the ruling is in the other madhahib.
I think there's some companies that actually tell you if they do it that go naturally. Others they tell you if they use catalysts.
There you go. Well, the vinegar that doesn't have the catalysts, so the enzymes, it's very expensive. You're looking probably $60 a bottle. It's really, but it's good stuff because it takes years for that to happen on its own. It's a long process. So of course, production and capitalist society and consumerism, they wanted the vinegar process to go from whatever it is to alcohol to vinegar in a minute if they could, so they could sell more of it. So that's the issue, and always it's quality over quantity. But the best thing is to contact the producer and speak to them and see what they're doing or what they're not doing.
If it's organic, like, is that fine? Would that?
It doesn't necessarily mean that, no. It doesn't matter if it's organic or whatever the condition of it, biodynamic or whatever it might be. The question is, Islamically speaking, in the Shafi'i in particular, is that did that process that would change from alcohol to vinegar happen on its own? Because this is the story. If they put an apple core in, or they put something, a solid object or an object into that vinegar, into the alcohol to turn it into vinegar, then that thing, once it hits the alcohol, becomes najis. So it's still in the vinegar. When the vinegar goes from being alcohol to being vinegar, that thing is still in there. So it's made the whole thing najis because it was part of the alcohol. If it disappears and goes into it, a chemical, I don't know, there's no ruling about that I've seen, because that's something new they've been doing only for like 30 years or whatever. You know, the good old cheap no frills, that's how it was. There's a whole bottle of vinegar like for 60 cents back in the day. That's just chemical. It's just a whole bunch of, there's nothing really real in that. I think it's acetic acid or something like that. That's what vinegar comes from, some sort of an acid. So they just
That's what it is.
sell it off. So you got to call the supplier. Look, it's hard to be Muslim and eat halal. It's hard to be Muslim and eat halal. So I don't use vinegar myself anymore. I just do lemon juice and olive oil. You know what I mean? But you have to choose the standard. We tried to find some halal organic meat, chicken, or there's not around. They only export it. They do make it, but it's exported because the market's too small in Australia. So you got to make those choices that are fundamental to your health physically and your spiritual and mental health as well. And unfortunately, it's tough because people don't care. If it's cheap, generally speaking, they'll buy it, and quality isn't as important as price. And that's unfortunately the society in which we live in.